What happens when a man tries to buy a new life by selling his wife's? Julian Andrea thought he was a player. He sold his wife Amelia's priceless art, her heirloom watch, and her classic car, all to impress his new mistress. He thought he was liquidating marital assets. What he forgot to check was the fine print. He didn't just commit betrayal, he committed a felony. Because Julian was about to learn a terrifying lesson. His wife's things were in her name. But her name was on a whole different level. In the hushed, old-money enclaves of Boston's Beacon Hill, Amelia Wentworth and Julian Andrea were the perfect portrait of modern power. Their triplex overlooking the public garden was a testament to curated taste, a blend of Wentworth family heirlooms and sleek, modern minimalism. Amelia, descended from one of Boston's founding families, was not a detached heiress. She was a formidable venture capitalist, a woman who could dissect a Series B funding proposal with the same precision she used to host senators. Julian Andrea was her handsome, charismatic counterpart. He ran a boutique luxury real estate firm, a profession that kept him adjacent to the wealth he craved but had never truly possessed. He was ambitious, charming, and deeply, secretly insecure. He loved Amelia, but he hated the shadow cast by the Wentworth name, a name etched onto library wings and museum plaques. He was the +1 in a world that only respected the one. Amelia, blinded by what she believed was a genuine partnership, trusted him implicitly. Their prenuptial agreement, drafted by the formidable Ropes and Gray law firm, was a necessity of her station, but in her heart it was a mere formality. Her private collection was her true passion. It wasn't vast, but it was personal. In the study hung a small, intimate charcoal sketch by David Hockney, a preparatory drawing for a larger piece, gifted by her grandfather. In her dressing room, nestled in a worn leather box, was her grandmother's 1950s Patek Philippe Calatrava, a watch of understated, timeless elegance. And in their private garage, gleaming under soft lights, was her most prized possession, a 1965 Mercedes-Benz 230 SL, the Pagoda model, in its original factory white. It wasn't just a car, it was her first love, a bequest from the grandfather who had taught her to drive in it. Julian admired these things, but he saw them differently. He didn't see history, he saw capital. He saw assets, frozen in time, that could be working for him. The tension, invisible to their friends, had been building. Julian had been trying to land a major deal, a foothold that would finally make him Julian Andrea, not just Amelia Wentworth's husband. He was angling to partner on a new billion-dollar luxury development in the Seaport District, a project headed by a sharp, ruthless, and captivating developer from New York. Her name was Chloe Reed, and she was everything Amelia was not: new money, laser-focused, and utterly unimpressed by Bostonian lineage. Julian was smitten, not just with Chloe, but with the version of himself he saw in her eyes, a titan, a player, a man of his own making. But to be that man, he needed capital. He needed to show Chloe he wasn't just riding his wife's coattails. He needed to make a splash. The pressure mounted at a cocktail party at the Last Hurrah, the famous political haunt at the Omni Parker house. Julian had cornered Chloe Reed near the bar, his voice a low, urgent murmur. "The Seaport Tower is revolutionary, Chloe, but you're missing the local touch. You need someone who knows the Boston market, who knows the buyers." Chloe sipped her martini, her eyes analytical. "I know buyers, Julian. I know spreadsheets. Right now, my spreadsheets say my current partners are solid. What do you bring to the table? And I don't mean your wife's guest list for a charity gala." The remark was a perfectly aimed dart. It pricked his deepest insecurity. "I bring my own capital," Julian lied. the words tasting like ash. I'm prepared to invest. A significant buy-in. 7 figures. Chloe's eyebrow raised, a flicker of genuine interest. 7 figures? Liquid? That's a different conversation. I'm meeting with private equity groups next week. If you want a seat at that table, you come with a certified check. Show me you're a serious person. A serious person. The phrase echoed in his head. He walked back to their Beacon Hill home, the city lights blurring through a haze of resentment. He approached Amelia in her study, where she was reviewing a biotech portfolio. "Amelia, I need a loan," he said, trying to sound casual. "A loan? For what, darling?" she asked, not looking up. "The Seaport deal. Chloe Reed's project. I have a chance to get in on the ground floor. I need about 2 million. Amelia finally looked up, her blue eyes sharp. 2 million? Julian, that's not a loan. That's a high-risk investment. I've seen the pitch deck for that tower. It's over-leveraged, and Reed is known for burning partners. The Wentworth Trust would never approve it." "I'm not asking the trust," he snapped. "I'm asking you, my wife. And as your wife, I'm advising you against it. It's a bad bet, Julian. We can't leverage our assets for a vanity project." "Our assets?" he scoffed, the word "our" feeling like a lie. "You mean your assets, your trust, your grandfather's money? When do I get to build something of my own? Or am I just your well-dressed escort for the rest of my life?" The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. Amelia recoiled, stung. "That's not fair, Julian. I've always supported your business." "By giving me an allowance?" he shot back. "I'm not your charity case, Amelia. I'll find the money myself." He stormed out, the heavy oak door slamming shut. Amelia sat in the silence, hurt and bewildered. She believed he was just lashing out from a bruised ego. She had no idea that in his mind, "I'll find the money myself," was not a threat. It was a plan. The next day, Julian Andrea went to Wells Fargo to apply for a personal business loan. He was rejected in under an hour. His personal income, disconnected from Amelia's, couldn't support a loan for 20,000 hololos, let alone 2 million. His credit was a tangled mess of high-limit cards and leased cars, all underwritten by his association with her. He was trapped. And in that trap, his resentment curdled into a cold, criminal resolve. If the banks wouldn't give him money, he would take it. Julian's betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a methodical, compartmentalized descent. He told himself it was temporary. He was just borrowing the assets. He'd replace everything, and more when the Seaport deal paid out. Amelia would never even have to know. He started small, to test the waters. Item number 1, the Patek Philippe Calatrava. It was easy. He knew the code to her personal safe. He took the watch, its delicate ticking seeming to mock him. He didn't go to a reputable jeweler. They would ask questions, demand paperwork. He went to a high-end pawnbroker in the Jewelers Building downtown, a man who dealt in quick cash for desperate people with expensive things. "It was my mother's," Julian lied smoothly. "Sentimental, but times are tough." The broker nodded, barely listening. He inspected the watch. "It's a beautiful 96. I can give you 30,000. Cash." It was a fraction of its auction value, but it was fast. Julian took the money. It felt dirty, but it also felt good. It was a start. Item number 2, the David Hockney sketch. This was harder. It was on the wall. Amelia would notice. He waited until she was on a 2-day business trip to San Francisco. He carefully removed the sketch from its frame. He had a contact, a shady but effective art dealer on Newbury Street named Silas Croft, who specialized in discreet sales. "A client of mine is downsizing," Julian explained, the lie coming more easily now. He wants to avoid the auction houses, keep it private. Silas Croft knew a lie when he heard one. He also knew a genuine Hockney. He suspected it was a divorce sale, a husband trying to hide assets. He didn't care. "I can wire you 200,000 by end of day," Silas said. "I need more." "250. And that's me being generous, Julian. The provenance is thin." "Done." When Amelia returned, Julian had already replaced the Hockney with a high-quality Giclée print of a generic landscape. He hoped she wouldn't look closely. Item number 3. The Mercedes-Benz 230 SL. This was the big one. This would get him the bulk of the money. It was also the most complex. The car was insured, registered, and titled. He couldn't just sell it. He needed paperwork. He went to her study, to the antique desk, where she kept her personal files. He found the car's title, and there, in the file, was her signature on an old insurance document. He was a decent mimic. He spent an entire night practicing her elegant, looping Amelia L. Wentworth on sheet after sheet of paper. Finally, he forged her signature onto a bill of sale and a title transfer application. He contacted a specialized classic car broker who dealt with international clients. The broker was impressed by the car's pristine condition. "This is a 10 out of 10 pagoda, Mr. Andrea. We have a collector in Dubai who will pay a premium for this. He'll pay 150,000 holders and cover shipping." "I need it gone by tomorrow," Julian said, "and I need the payment wired to this new account." He'd opened a personal account at a different bank, one Amelia didn't use. The next day, a flatbed truck arrived in the early morning darkness. Julian watched from the window as his wife's most cherished possession was loaded up and driven away. In 3 days, he had liquidated nearly $500,000. It wasn't the $2 million he wanted, but it was enough, he thought, to secure his seat at Chloe Reed's table. He felt a surge of adrenaline, of power. He had done it. He was his own man. For a week, Julian lived in a state of high alert, but Amelia's schedule was packed. She was consumed by a difficult merger, working late and rising early. She moved through her home on autopilot, her mind on cap tables and legal exposure. The first crack appeared on a Friday night. They were dressing for a charity gala at the Boston Public Library. Amelia went to her safe to get the Patek Philippe. She frowned, her fingers brushing the empty velvet slot. "Julian, darling," she called out, "did you take my grandmother's watch to be serviced? I asked you to do that last month. You forgot." Julian, tying his bow tie, froze. His reflection stared back at him. "Yes," he said, his voice miraculously steady. "Yes, I did. Took it to Tourneau on Copley. Just a cleaning. It wasn't ready in time. My apologies." Amelia felt a pang of annoyance, but she accepted it. "Thank you for handling it," she said, choosing a different watch. The lie held, but it had unsettled him. He became jumpy. The next day, Amelia was in her study, sipping her morning coffee. The generic landscape print over the fireplace suddenly caught her eye. It was ugly. Tacky. "Julian, what is this?" she asked as he walked in. "What's what?" "This painting. Where is the Hockney?" Julian's blood ran cold. He'd been hoping she wouldn't notice for months. "Oh," he said, attempting a laugh. "It's being restored. The frame was warping and the paper was showing some humidity damage. I sent it to a specialist. This is just a loaner from the gallery so the wall wouldn't be bare." It was a plausible lie, but something in his eyes was wrong. He was too quick with the answer, too defensive. A small, cold seed of suspicion planted itself in Amelia's mind. She knew exactly which specialists the family used for art restoration. She would have been consulted. "Which specialist, Julian?" she asked, her voice quiet. I don't remember the name. Silas. Somebody. On Newbury. He's the best. Silas Croft. Amelia knew that name. He wasn't a restorer. He was a dealer, and not a reputable one. The seed of suspicion began to sprout, fast and thorny. I'm going to run some errands, she said, her tone flat. She grabbed her keys. I'll come with you, he said, a little too quickly. No, I need to go to the bank. She walked out. But she didn't go to the bank. She went to the garage. She pressed the button on her fob. The heavy door rumbled open, revealing the empty, oil-stained concrete square where the white Mercedes should have been. It wasn't a pang of annoyance this time. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole her breath. The watch could be serviced. The art could be restored. But the car was gone. She stumbled back, leaning against the cold brick wall. It wasn't a service. It wasn't a restoration. It was theft. She walked back into the triplex, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Julian was in the kitchen, pouring a drink, his hand visibly shaking. Julian, she said, and her voice was no longer the voice of his wife. It was the voice of a CEO about to fire someone. Where is my car? He dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. The lie died on his lips. He saw her face, not angry, not sad, but cold, terrifyingly cold. You wouldn't understand, he stammered. Try me. I'm building our future, Amelia. Something I built, not your father. This deal with Chloe is huge. It's our ticket. My car, Julian, where is it? I sold it, he finally yelled, the confession bursting out of him. I sold it, and the painting, and the watch. It's just things, Amelia, just stuff. This deal will make us 10 times that. I'm leveraging our assets for our future. Amelia stared at him. The shock had passed, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was crystalline. The man she loved didn't exist. He was a hollow shell, filled with envy and arrogance. She took a deep breath. And then, the entire dynamic of their lives, of the past 10 years, tilted on its axis. The power shifted, and Julian was about to be crushed underneath it. Our assets? Amelia repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through his frantic shouting. What assets are you referring to, Julian? Julian, still riding the high of his confession, scoffed. The art, the car, the watch, our marital property. I have a right. No, Amelia interrupted, holding up a hand. The gesture was so absolute, he stopped talking. You don't. You seem to be under a grave misunderstanding. She walked to her study, Julian following her, sputtering. What are you talking about? We're married, Amelia. What's yours is mine. Amelia sat down behind her desk, the picture of calm. She folded her hands. Julian, when you sold the Hockney sketch, what name did you sell it under? Mine, ours. It doesn't matter. It does, she said, because the Hockney was never my personal property. It was, and is, an asset of the Wentworth Family Trust, which I administer. It was on loan to me personally. So when you sold it, you didn't sell our asset. You sold a piece of art belonging to a multi-billion-dollar corporate entity. That's not a domestic dispute, Julian. That's theft by conversion, a felony. Julian's face went white. The trust, the watch, she continued, her voice relentless, was my grandmother's. It was specifically itemized in her last will and testament as a personal bequest to me prior to our marriage. It's not marital property. It's my sole and separate property, as outlined in Schedule A of our prenuptial agreement, which you signed. The prenup, he stammered. And finally, Amelia said, leaning forward, my Mercedes, my grandfather's 230 SL. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. That car is registered solely in my maiden name, Amelia L. Wentworth. The title is in a safe deposit box at Bank of America on Federal Street. Which means, Julian, in order to sell it, you had to forge my signature." Julian collapsed into the chair opposite her. The full, catastrophic weight of his actions crashed down on him. He hadn't just leveraged assets. He had stolen from a trust, violated a prenup, and committed felony forgery. "Amelia, please!" he begged, the arrogance vanishing, replaced by a pathetic, sniveling fear. "It was a mistake. I can get it back. I was going to replace it. It was for us." "There is no us," Amelia said. She finished dialing. A voice answered. "Arthur, it's Amelia. I'm afraid I have a situation. A criminal one. Yes, I'll hold for Mr. Harrison." Julian's eyes widened in terror. Arthur Harrison wasn't a divorce lawyer. He was the senior partner at Ropes and Gray, the legal pit bull who handled the Wentworth Trust's corporate litigation. He was the man you called when you wanted to annihilate someone, legally. "Amelia, no, don't do this," Julian whispered, tears welling. We can just get a divorce. Don't call the police, please." "The police?" Amelia said, looking at him as if he were a bug. "Julian, you stole from my family's trust. I'm not calling the police. Mr. Harrison is calling the district attorney. He's also calling the bank to freeze your new account. And he's calling the U.S. Marshals to issue a warrant for the international recovery of my car. You didn't just break my heart, you broke the law." She made her second call. "Detective Riley." "Hi, Mike. It's Amelia Wentworth. I'm at my home. Yes, I'm safe. But I need to report a theft. Several, in fact." "The suspect?" "Oh, he's right here. His name is Julian Andrea. Yes, my husband." The aftermath was not a quiet separation. It was a legal detonation. Within 2 hours, 2 uniformed Boston police officers, led by a grim-faced detective Mike Riley, were at their door. Julian, who had been sitting catatonically in the study, was read his rights and arrested in his expensive Brioni suit. The humiliation was absolute as he was cuffed and walked out of the building, past the doorman who had always greeted him with a fawning, "Mr. Andrea." Simultaneously, Arthur Harrison's legal team at Ropes and Gray moved with terrifying efficiency. They were not divorce attorneys. They were corporate raiders, and they treated Julian as a hostile entity. By 5 p.m. on that same Saturday, they had 1. Obtained an emergency court order freezing the new bank account Julian had opened, which still held over $400,000. 2. Filed a civil suit for conversion, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. 3. Filed a lis pendens against Julian's personal property, including his now defunct real estate firm. 4. Contacted the Boston DA's white-collar crime unit with a fully prepared brief, including copies of the Wentworth Trust's inventory, the Patek's bequest documents, and the forged title application, which Harrison's team had already acquired from the RMV. 5. Contacted Silas Croft, the art dealer. Faced with felony charges for trading in stolen property, Silas folded instantly. He gave up the name of the New York buyer and returned his commission. The Hockney was recovered by Monday. 6. Began the complex process of engaging with law enforcement in Dubai to seize the Mercedes. But the most devastating blow came from the person Julian had done it all for. Chloe Reed. Chloe was at a meeting for her Seaport project when she got a news alert on her phone from Boston.com. Prominent realtor Julian Andrea arrested for theft of priceless art vehicles. She read the article, her blood turning to ice. It wasn't the theft that horrified her. It was the stupidity. He wasn't a player. He was a fraud. A small-time, desperate con man who had lied to her. He had not only failed to secure a seat at her table, he had now publicly linked her project to a messy, high-profile domestic crime. Her brand was everything. She acted decisively. She called her own lawyer, then she called the Suffolk County District Attorney's office. "I believe I have information relevant to the Julian Andrea case," she said, her voice pure ice. "I have text messages and a voicemail where he explicitly details his plan to liquidate his wife's assets to buy into my deal. I want it on the record that I had no knowledge of his criminal methods, and I want to help." She handed over everything, every text where he bragged. "Just sold the old man's car. Cash is coming." Every message where he said, "Amelia will never know." Chloe didn't just abandon Julian, she buried him. Julian sat in a holding cell, his one phone call spent on a cut-rate criminal defense lawyer who was hopelessly out of his depth. He had thought he was a titan. He was a fool. He had tried to sell his wife's things, only to discover he was the only thing in their life that was truly worthless. The Suffolk County Superior Courthouse was a fortress of grey granite, but for the 6 weeks of Commonwealth vs. Andrea, it felt more like a Hollywood sound stage. The trial was the only story that mattered in Boston. The press, smelling the intoxicating mix of old money, sexual betrayal, and high-stakes crime, had dubbed it the Beacon Hill Betrayal. Every morning, a gauntlet of news vans and photographers lined the street. They captured the 2 daily arrivals. First, Julian Andrea, who shuffled in looking like a ghost in an ill-fitting suit. His expensive, charismatic facade had crumbled, revealing the weak, terrified man beneath. He was out on bail, but his assets were frozen, his reputation radioactive. He was represented by a harried, competent, but deeply outgunned state-appointed defender named Martin Glass, who had the unenviable job of arguing that stealing a trust fund's assets was just a marital misunderstanding. The second arrival was Amelia Wentworth. She never varied. She arrived in a black sedan, dressed not in mournful black, but in sharp, powerful business attire, a Loro Piana cashmere coat, a the Row suit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She was flanked not by family, but by a rotating pair of junior associates from Ropes and Gray. They weren't her lawyers. The Commonwealth was handling that. They were there as representatives of the Wentworth Trust, a constant, silent reminder to the court that Julian hadn't just stolen from a person, he had stolen from a corporation. Her face was a mask of cold, professional calm. Inside courtroom 907, the air crackled. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Elena Ramirez, a rising star in the white-collar crime unit who saw this case not as a domestic squabble, but as a career-making felony. "This is not a divorce, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Ramirez said in her opening statement, her voice ringing with clarity. "This is a heist. This is not a case of what's yours is mine. This is a case of fraud, forgery, and calculated predatory theft. The defendant, Julian Andrea, was not a partner. He was a parasite. And when his ego demanded feeding, he decided to feast on his wife's past, her grandmother's memory, her grandfather's legacy, and her family's trust. We will prove, beyond any doubt, that this was not a mistake. It was a strategy, and it was a crime. Martin Glass, Julian's defender, did his best to muddy the waters. He was a man drowning, but he would at least make a splash. "This is not a heist," he countered, his voice folksy and weary. "It's a marriage, a messy, complicated, ambitious marriage. We're not talking about a stranger breaking into a home. We're talking about a husband and a wife. A husband who wanted to build something, to prove himself. A husband who, yes, made a terrible, foolish mistake. He moved assets. He didn't steal them. He moved them. He intended to pay it all back, 10 times over. The prosecution wants you to see a criminal. I want you to see a man who loved his wife, was blinded by ambition, and is now being crucified by a family name that has never seen him as anything but an outsider. Amelia Wentworth wasn't a victim. She was a partner, until the bright lights of this project scared her, and she decided she was a victim after all. The prosecution began, methodically, building a wall of evidence so high Martin Glass could never hope to climb it. First came the brokers, the nervous, sweaty man from the jeweler's building who had bought the Patek Philippe. He said it was his mother's, the broker testified, said he was sad to part with it. He wanted cash, fast. On cross-examination, Glass tried to normalize it. People sell family items all the time when they're in a financial pinch, don't they? Sure, the broker shrugged, but they don't usually have a $10 million home on Beacon Hill. Next was Silas Croft, the art dealer. He was a more polished witness, having secured a deal with the DA for his testimony. He was cool, precise, and devastating. Mr. Andrea contacted me, Silas said, adjusting his cuffs. He said he had a Hockney sketch to sell. He was specific, discreet, no auction houses, and fast. He wanted the wire to a new account, not a joint one. And what did you infer from that? ADA Ramirez asked. That he was hiding the sale from his wife, Silas said simply. It's classic divorce sale behavior. Sell the assets, hide the cash. Glass pounced on the cross-examination. So, you suspected it was a divorce sale, as you put it? You suspected it might not be his to sell? Silas smiled, a thin reptilian gesture. Mr. Glass, I am an art dealer, not a marriage counselor. He had the painting. I had a client. We made a deal. You're a shark, aren't you, Mr. Croft? You saw a man in distress and you lowballed him on a priceless piece of art. He set the terms, Mr. Glass, not I. He needed speed. Speed costs. In fact, it was only when Mr. Arthur Harrison from Ropes and Gray called me and politely explained the legal definitions of receiving stolen property and accessory to felony conversion that I fully appreciated the situation. I returned my commission immediately and provided all my records. Julian sank lower in his chair. Day after day, the evidence mounted. A forgery expert from the Massachusetts State Police demonstrated, with blown-up high-resolution images, how the elegant Amelia L. Wentworth on the Mercedes title transfer was a competent but ultimately flawed imitation. A banker from Citizens Bank testified to the creation of Julian's secret account, the influx of $430,000, and the immediate transfer of $250,000 to an LLC named Seaport Holdings, controlled by Chloe Reed. Then, Chloe Reed herself was called to the stand. The courtroom was packed. Chloe entered like a conquering general, dressed in a severe, razor-sharp Balenciaga suit. She was not a mistress in the traditional, sordid sense. She was, as the press had dubbed her, the siren of the seaport. She was a shark, and she was about to confirm Julian was nothing but chum. Ms. Reed, Ramirez began, please tell the court about your professional relationship with the defendant. Chloe's voice was clear and cold, with a faint New York clip. I have no professional relationship with Mr. Andrea. He was an acquaintance who relentlessly pursued a buy-in on a development project I manage. He was persistent. Did he ever represent to you that he had the capital for such a buy-in? Yes. He repeatedly claimed he was liquidating his own personal assets to secure a $2 million partner stake. Your Honor, Ramirez said, the prosecution would like to introduce into evidence text messages between Ms. Reed's phone and the defendant's. The messages were displayed on the large screens for the jury. Julian Andrea. The cash is coming. I'm making it happen. Chloe Reed. Making it happen doesn't cut a check, Julian. I have a meeting with KKR on Friday. You're either in or you're out. Julian Andrea. Just sold the old man's car. It's on a boat. Another 150K. Julian Andrea. The Hockney is gone too. 250K. Amelia will never know. I'm almost there. Chloe Reed. I don't care about the details, Julian. I just care about the wire. A murmur swept the court. Amelia will never know. It was the nail in the coffin. Chloe was expressionless. When I was contacted by the district attorney's office, and these messages were shown to me in context, that the old man's car and the Hockney were stolen property, I was appalled. My firm has zero tolerance for fraud. I provided my full cooperation. It was Martin Glass's turn to cross-examine. He knew he couldn't break her, so his only hope was to paint her as the true villain, the seductress who had lured Julian to his doom. Ms. Reed, you're a powerful woman. You run a billion-dollar project. You're telling this jury you had no idea where Julian Andrea, a man you knew, was married to one of the wealthiest women in Boston, was getting this cash? Mr. Glass, I manage a portfolio of 36 high-net-worth investors. I am not their accountant. I assumed he was a man of his own means. You assumed? Glass sneered. Or you just didn't want to ask? You dangled the deal of a lifetime. You saw he was desperate, and you looked the other way. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Let me be very clear, counselor. I deal with serious people, titans, men and women who control their own wealth. Mr. Andrea came to me, pretending to be one of them. It turned out he was a child playing dress-up in his wife's closet. When I discovered he was a fraud and a criminal, I cut him loose. My only mistake was overestimating him. His deficiency is not my problem. She had disemboweled him. Julian stared at his hands, his face ashen. Martin Glass, defeated, muttered, "No further questions." Finally, on the last day of testimony, ADA Ramirez called her final witness. The Commonwealth calls Amelia Wentworth to the stand. The courtroom held its breath. This was the main event. Amelia walked to the stand, her face impassive. She took the oath. Ramirez handled her with gentle, respectful precision. She didn't ask about the betrayal, the pain, the affair. She kept it to the facts. Mrs. Wentworth, I'd like to show you what has been marked as Exhibit A. Can you identify it? A photo of the Patek Philippe watch appeared on the screen. It is my grandmother's watch, Amelia said, her voice steady. It was bequeathed to me in her will. Exhibit B. A photo of the Hockney sketch. It is a David Hockney drawing. It belongs to the Wentworth Family Trust. It was on permanent loan to my home. Exhibit C. A photo of the white Mercedes 230 SL. Here, Amelia's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. She took a breath. It was my 1965 Mercedes. It was a gift from my grandfather. He taught me to drive in that car. And Mrs. Wentworth, Ramirez said, her voice soft but carrying across the silent room, did you ever, at any time, give the defendant, your husband, permission to sell, leverage, or in any way transfer ownership of these 3 items? Amelia looked, for the first time, directly at Julian. Her eyes were not filled with hate or sadness. They were filled with a chilling, profound indifference. No, she said. I did not. Your witness, Mr. Glass. This was it. Martin Glass knew his entire defense rested on this moment. He had to convince the jury that Amelia was a liar, that this was all a performance. Mrs. Wentworth, he began, trying to sound sympathetic. This must be very difficult for you. It is, she agreed, her voice flat. You're a highly intelligent woman, are you not? A venture capitalist by trade? I am. You understand high-risk, high-reward investments, correct? You You do it every day. I understand calculated risk, Mr. Glass, not reckless gambles. This seaport deal, Glass said, raising his voice. It was the biggest deal in Boston. And your husband, he had a way in. He had a chance to finally step out from behind the Wentworth name and become a titan in his own right. Weren't you proud of him? I told him it was a bad investment, Amelia said. The project was over-leveraged, and Chloe Reed's reputation for burning partners was well known. So you did discuss it, Glass pounced. You talked about the deal. You knew he was passionate about it. He was passionate. I was not. I told him the Wentworth Trust would not be investing, and I advised him against it personally. Glass began to pace, his voice swelling with performative outrage. But he was your husband. You loved him. And you're telling this jury that when he came to you, begging for a chance to prove himself, you just quoted a balance sheet at him? I gave him my professional and personal opinion, yes. No, Glass shouted, slamming his hand on the defense table. That's not what happened. You were in on it. You're a high-stakes gambler, Mrs. Wentworth. You saw the thrill, the billions on the table, and you told him, Julian, let's go for it. Use what you have to. You knew he was selling those trinkets. You knew. And when the press got wind of it, when it got messy, you got cold feet. You panicked, and you did what your family has always done. You threw the outsider to the wolves to save the precious Wentworth name. The accusation hung in the air. Julian was actually nodding, tears in his eyes, as if this was the gospel truth. Amelia sat silent for a long moment. She looked at Glass, then at Julian, then at the jury. No, Mr. Glass, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. That is not what happened. That's all you have to say? Glass scoffed. Just no. You expect this jury to believe you, with no proof. It's your word against his. A messy, bitter, she said, divorce battle. How can this jury possibly know what really happened in that study? ADA. Elena Ramirez stood up slowly. A small, tight smile was on her face. Objection, she said. The judge looked annoyed. On what grounds, Ms. Ramirez? Your witness is on cross. The defense is badgering, Your Honor. And more importantly, he is operating under a false premise. Glass whirled around. What false premise? Your premise, Mr. Glass, Ramirez said, walking toward the bench, is that this is a he said, she said situation. That what happened in that home is unknowable. That is, quite simply, false. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. Explain, Counselor. Your Honor, the defense is attempting to paint a false narrative of private conversations. But that is incorrect. The entire confrontation on the day of the defendant's arrest was recorded. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Julian, who had been performing his role as the wronged husband, froze. His face went from pale to a ghastly, greenish white. What? Glass stammered. Recorded. That's illegal wiretapping. It's inadmissible. Ramirez's smile widened. It would be, Mr. Glass, if Mrs. Wentworth had planted a secret recorder. But that's not what this is. The Wentworth residence on Beacon Hill is a fully automated, lock-sewn smart home. It controls lights, HVAC, security, and audio. The system, by default, logs all audio in the common areas, including the study, when the away security profile is active. Mrs. Wentworth was away on her San Francisco trip when the thefts began, but the system remained active until the moment she returned. Furthermore, the entire confrontation on the day of the arrest, it wasn't just a conversation, it was the confession. This is an outrage, Glass sputtered, but the judge overruled him. The audio was obtained via a legal search warrant of the home's central server. It is admissible. Ms. Ramirez, you may play the recording." A technician hit a key. The speakers in the courtroom, which had been silent, hissed to life. And then, there it was. First, the shattering of a glass. Then, Julian's voice, not the pathetic whisper in the courtroom, but the arrogant, frantic shout of a man cornered. Julian, audio. "I sold it, and the painting, and the watch. It's just things, Amelia, just stuff. This deal with Chloe is huge. It's our ticket. It will make us 10 times that. I'm leveraging our assets for our future." Martin Glass had his head in his hands. Julian looked like he was going to be physically sick. And then, Amelia's voice. It was the same voice the jury had just heard. Cold, precise, and utterly in control. Amelia, audio. "Our assets. What assets are you referring to, Julian? You seem to be under a grave misunderstanding. The Hockney was never my personal property. It was and is an asset of the Wentworth Family Trust. The watch was a personal bequest, as outlined in Schedule A of our prenuptial agreement. And finally, my Mercedes. The title is in a safe deposit box, which means, Julian, in order to sell it, you had to forge my signature." The recording clicked off. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was not a "he said, she said." It was a confession, followed by a live-action legal lecture on corporate and probate law. ADA Ramirez turned to the jury. "The Commonwealth rests, Your Honor." The closing arguments were a formality. Martin Glass offered a short, pathetic plea for mercy. "My client was desperate. He made a terrible mistake. This is a family matter that should have stayed a family matter. Don't ruin his life." ADA Ramirez, on the other hand, was brutal. "He called them things," she said, walking slowly in front of the jury box. "Just stuff. A watch from a beloved grandmother, a priceless work of art, a car full of cherished memories. He didn't see value, he saw cash. He didn't see a partner, he saw a bank. This wasn't a mistake. This was a violation. He's not just a fool. He's a predator. And he wasn't just stupid. He was arrogant. He believed the Wentworth name, the name he so desperately resented, would protect him, that his wife would be too embarrassed, too proud to ever report him. He miscalculated, because he didn't just break her heart. He broke the law, he stole from her, and he stole from the Wentworth Trust. And in this Commonwealth, we have a name for that. It's called a felony." The jury deliberated for 45 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood. Julian was shaking so badly he had to grip the table. "On the charge of grand theft, 5 counts. How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of forgery, 2 counts. How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of theft by conversion, 1 count. How do you find?" "Guilty." Julian collapsed, a broken, sobbing mess. "Amelia," he cried out, a pathetic wail. "Amelia, please. I'm sorry. Don't let them do this." Amelia, for the first time, turned her head. She looked at the man she had once loved, now a convicted felon in a cheap suit, begging for her. She held his gaze. She did not nod. She did not cry. She simply watched. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! The defendant will be silent." At the sentencing hearing, the judge was scathing. "Mr. Andrea, you have shown this court nothing but profound self-pity. You took a woman who loved and trusted you, and you systematically, and with cold calculation, liquidated her history for your own ego. The breach of trust is one of the most profound I have ever seen. It is this court's judgment that you be sentenced to 8 to 10 years at MCI Cedar Junction." The gavel fell. It was over. 1 year later, the auction room at Sotheby's in New York was buzzing. The centerpiece, gleaming under the hot lights was a 1965 Mercedes-Benz 230 SL in pristine factory white. After a 9-month international legal fight, Ropes & Gray had successfully seized it from the collector in Dubai. Amelia sat in the front row, next to Arthur Harrison. She wasn't there to bid. She was there to close the loop. The bidding was fast. It was a perfect, story-filled example of the pagoda. And "Sold!" the auctioneer cried, striking the lectern. "To the bidder on the phone, for $210,000. Arthur Harrison leaned over. "Well done, Amelia. The trust is made whole." Amelia nodded. "No, not yet." 6 months after that. The building wasn't on Beacon Hill. It was a sturdy, dignified brick building in Jamaica Plain, one that housed Rosie's Place, Boston's oldest shelter for homeless and poor women. Today, they were cutting a ribbon on a new, fully funded wing, the Wentworth Foundation for Financial Justice. It wasn't a black tie gala. It was a community event with coffee and donuts. Amelia stood at a small podium, not in a Chanel suit, but in simple professional trousers and a blazer. She looked happier, more relaxed, than anyone had ever seen her. "My ex-husband," she began, her voice strong, "believed that my things, my property, my history, were his to take. He was wrong. But his crime, and the very public trial that followed, taught me a valuable, painful lesson. He had a team of brokers and bankers to help him commit his fraud. I had a team of corporate lawyers to help me fight back. We were both armed for a war he didn't even know he was starting." She looked out at the crowd of women, survivors, and shelter staff. But most women, they are not armed. They face financial abuse every single day, from partners and husbands who drain their bank accounts, forge their names, and destroy their credit. They are told it's a domestic dispute. They are told it's just a family matter. I am here to say it is not. It is a heist. She paused, gesturing to the new office doors. "This foundation is not built on my family's old money. It is built on new money. Money from a sold watch, a sold painting, and a sold car. Money that was stolen and then reclaimed. From now on, when a woman comes to this shelter, she will not just get a bed and a hot meal. She will get a forensic accountant. She will get a financial counselor. And if she needs it, she will get a pit bull of a lawyer. They will not have to fight alone. We will be their fortress. We will be their fine print. We will be their Ropes and Gray." She stepped away from the podium, not to the polite applause of senators, but to the cheers and hugs of the women she was there to serve. She had taken the name Julian had tried to steal and turned it into a shield. She had taken the assets he had called just stuff and forged them into a sword. And she was, finally and completely, her own woman. Julian Andrea discovered in the most painful way possible that a future built on deception, betrayal, and stolen power can only end in ruin. He believed he could profit from his wife's gifts, treating her power as something he could control, exploit, and sell for his own gain. But instead of elevating him, his scheme backfired catastrophically and became the very thing that destroyed him. His downfall serves as a striking reminder that the person you think you're manipulating may be far stronger, wiser, and more dangerous than you assume. Never underestimate someone just because you think you hold the upper hand. And most importantly, whether in deals, relationships, or life, always read the fine print, because the consequences of ignoring it can be far greater than you ever imagined. What did you think of Amelia's ultimate revenge? Was Julian's sentence fair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love dramatic stories like this one, stories of betrayal and karmic justice, then you've come to the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We have a new story coming for you every single week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for watching.